The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Hello, I'm Eileen Kavanaugh from Hennepin County Library Program Office, and my guest today is Roberta Meyer. Roberta is the author of Parent Connection, and her newest book is Listen to the Heart. She's a professional counselor, and she specializes in resolving communications problems. Welcome, Roberta. We're glad to have you with us
I'm
today.
delighted to be here. It's beautiful here.
The subtitle of your book is Creating Intimate Families Through the Power of Unconditional Love. But families in your book aren't always birth families.
That's right. It's very important for people to remember that in our mobile society, where people are moving a lot, where there are family differences sometimes that are difficult to resolve, it's important for people to know that it's okay to create a new family for yourself. So your family doesn't have to be your family of origin. Your family can be people with whom you have common interests, people about whom you care for other reasons, and it's really important to develop those relationships.
So that gives a whole new definition maybe of what family is.
Yes, actually the dictionary does say that a family can be a group of people who have a common interest or a common bond, so we're not even restricted by the dictionary definition in
it can
having
be as broad as the family of man.
That's exactly right. So I think it's really important for people to enhance their lives through other relationships.
Do you think that with this whole rapidly changing idea of families that more people are moving toward families of their own choosing?
I think definitely people are seeing the need to do that. Again, with the fact that people are moving across the country or maybe across the world for work-related reasons. They're splitting up of what we've always thought of as the nuclear family. There are many more single parents, step families, and people are seeing that there is a real need to create other family for themselves. And I think more people are doing it and feeling free to do it. I think a number of people are coming out of a system that they recognize as dysfunctional or that at least didn't work for them, and are seeing that if they're going to have a fulfilling life and move out of a situation that may have been toxic for them, their only alternative is to create new family for themselves, and people are doing that.
Are they able to do it without guilt?
Some people can and some people can't. There are people who feel still very strongly tied to their biological family, who feel that in order even to go on with their life, what they have to do is somehow to have everything tied up in neat little bows in their biological family. I think it's very important to resolve your own issues within yourself in regard to your family of origin. But there may be times when you're going to have to move on. And even if you have to do it with some guilt, I suggest that you find support for yourself, whether it's in a group or with a good therapist or a good friend, to let you go through the process, and hopefully the guilt will begin to recede as you go into your new life and feel fulfilled there. I know from my own personal experience, I had to, for a little while, sever my relationship pretty much with my biological family for my own health and well-being. But then, as I took a look at what my issues were and what the triggers were for me, and began to get the energy off of those, I was able to go back and establish a new relationship with my biological family. So I feel very grateful because I have my chosen family and I have my biological family, which has now also become a chosen family. So I get the best of both worlds. And in Listen to the Heart, I try to give people the tools to have both those worlds, or if only one is possible, then how to go about doing that.
And severing that relationship may have given you some extra energy to build your new relationship.
Yes, it's it's very important, I think, to take some time, no matter whether you're going to continue a relationship with your family of origin or whether you're going to try to let go of that or create new ones. I think patience is very important, and taking time and not being in too great a hurry about it. And I do think that there was a sort of an empty place in there for a little while where I hadn't created the new family, but I was letting go of the old one. But giving myself that time to sort of think things through and take care of myself did give me energy, and it worked out very well for me.
What do you think society of the future might be like with all these different family lifestyles?
I think it's a very exciting prospect. Now, I do think that family is very important. I was in Italy not long ago, and talking with some young women friends there, and we were just talking about our different perceptions of each other, the Italians of us and us of the Italians. And this young woman said, well, you know, we Italians think that you Americans don't value the family. There's so much divorce and breaking up and so on and so forth. And I can understand why she feels that way, and I know there are people in this country who feel that way. I think, actually, we do value the family very much. And yet, we also have a society that has said it's all right if a relationship isn't working out to go out and try something new. I think we need to find a balance in there. I'm not rigid in saying that everybody should stay with their mate forever, no matter what, if they're beating them or getting drunk or abusing the kids or whatever. I mean, I think that there are limits. On the other hand, I know that my husband and I have been married for 24 years and have gone through all kinds of ups and downs. I know a lot of my clients have gone through that. And I think if you can find it in your heart to really work through these issues, that's wonderful. But my husband and I have also been divorced. We had both been married previously before we married. And so we have a mixed family. We have stepchildren. We are step-parents. And in fact, I think we have been able all to enhance each other's lives. Our former spouses have found new relationships that have worked out well for them. We have not any animosity or bitterness toward any of those people. And some people may think it's really peculiar that we're all friendly with each other. But we are. I don't mean that we go to each other's house every night for dinner, but we support each other. We care about each other. So I have to say that my life has been enhanced by having two mothers-in-law and by having a lot of sisters-in-law and by having various children to relate to. It's been a very exciting experience. I think it's up to us to choose to have it be that way and to not have the separations be creating bitterness and harm. Now, I want to be very careful here because I don't want people to think that I'm advocating that everybody run out and have 5 marriages and a whole lot of different relationships in that way. I don't mean that. But when that's inevitable or when that does happen, there are ways to have it be an enhancing experience rather than a detrimental experience for everybody, including the children. I think it's how we handle it. And in Listen to the Heart, I try to give people tools to handle the difficult situations in life. Who has to worry if you're totally happily married and your kids are wonderful and nobody ever got into drugs and nobody ever did anything? That's terrific. My book isn't for those people.
And rare.
My book is for the people who have challenges that, you know, they're a single parent or they're a step parent or they may even live in a gay relationship. It's like, how do we then live life fully and supportively and live in these somewhat difficult circumstances?
It sounds as if some of what you're saying is that it helps just to know that you have some freedom of choice here, that there are some options.
I think knowing that you have options is the key. And in the work that I do with my clients, about 90% of it is helping people to get past their barriers to what I call the yes but response. Well, I could, but, well, that's really not a possibility because, or well, maybe I could, but if we can begin to open up to what all the options are, life has many wonderful surprises for us.
Some people say that familial ties can really never be broken, especially the mother-daughter tie, and yet you do seem to say in your book that sometimes it's better to let go of those ties and establish more constructive relationships.
Yes, I think that, again, that has to be an individual decision. I talk about my relationship with my mother with her permission. She and I had a very difficult relationship for many, many years and have been able to resolve that. And so I hold that out as a possibility for everybody because my relationship with my mother was very toxic for me at one time. I could not be in her presence. And I'm not blaming her for that. That was my reaction to the relationship. At the time, of course, I blamed her for it. Obviously, it was her fault. But I now know that it was my reaction to her that was the problem. My mother, one of the ways that she shows love is by being very, very critical. Now, I grew up with the idea that if somebody loved you, they approved of you. I thought those two things went together. Well, the subtitle of my book has to do with creating intimate families through the power of unconditional love. And I mean unconditional love, but I don't mean unconditional approval. And the thing that I had to learn was that whether my mother did it right or wrong, what she meant to do was to have me be as magnificent as I could possibly be. And if she saw something that interfered with that, whether it was my behavior or the pimple on the end of my nose, she was going to comment on it. And so when I was able to translate her criticism into where it was really coming from, our relationship really began to take on a new light, a whole new meaning to it. Now, I want to be very clear here. If I'm having a problem with somebody, that is my problem. It is not their problem, unless they think it's a problem. That means that I have to find out what's going on over here that's creating that problem for me. The problem is a lot of people stop there and they say, oh, I see, that's my problem. I have to work on that over here. And they use that as an excuse to never communicate to the other person. Now, I don't mean that at all. What I had to do was I had to sit down with my mom. And I had to say, you know, Mom, I'm very sensitive to criticism. I don't take it very well, but I finally have figured out that when you criticize me, it's because you love me. And she looked at me in amazement, like, you just figured that out now? And I said, well, yeah, I just figured that out now. But the point is that I did figure it out. Now, at the same time, when we walk into a room and I see you, and the first thing out of your mouth is, Roberta, that color doesn't look good on you, or you've got a spot on your dress, or you're not going to wear your hair like that, are you? I take that a little personally, and I create a barrier, and then I don't want to be with you. So I have a request, and my request is that when we meet, the first thing we do is find out how each other are, and maybe talk about the week and talk about some other things. Then later, if you have a criticism for me, let's talk about it later. But first, let's say hi. Well, she was able to hear that. She wasn't able to do it. She was able to hear it. Mm-hmm. But over time, now that I had said this was my request, she made a really concerted effort. And it has finally gotten to the point where most of the time when my mom and I get together, the first thing we do is say hi and how are you and so on and so forth. Occasionally she slips, but she's human, What this entails, establishing relationships that work, is what I call moccasin walking. And it comes from a little Indian saying that I keep on my wall at all times to look at. And what it says is, do not criticize another until you have walked 2 miles in their moccasins. What I've finally learned is that if I am going to have an intimate relationship with you, I have to be willing to walk in your moccasins, find out where you're coming from, before I start condemning you or setting up barriers to the relationship. That's what happened with my mom. I was able to moccasin walk. I was able to understand where she was coming from, whether I liked the way she did it or not, and the transformation of our relationship began to take place. In Listen to the Heart, I give people the tools for moccasin walking. Also the tools for then going on and communicating so that the other person can moccasin walk with them. You see, in other words, I had to give my mom my experience so that she could step in my shoes. And that's what effective communication is, and that's what makes an intimate relationship possible.
This sort of almost answers one of my questions further on down the line, which was very often when I read a self-help book, I say to myself, oh, this is wonderful advice. This really makes a lot of sense to me, but I never do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if this is a problem with self-help books, if some people need more motivation than
Yes. I'm very aware that a book can open doors. It can make people see things in a new light, but it doesn't really put people into action. The person has to put themselves into action. So in Listen to the Heart, I suggest periodically throughout the book that if people are having difficulty with these concepts or with carrying them out, that they seek professional help. Or just a friend that they can really trust, but not a friend who supports them in their old behaviors. A friend who's willing to challenge them, who is willing to give them a little kick and support them in moving on into new behaviors. But you have to sit down with a friend and say, look, I've read this neat book and I really want to try some of these things out. I really need your help. And so if you see that I'm not doing this, then I want you to give me the feedback. If you go to a professional and tell them what your goal is, then they can guide you in that. And also in Listen to the Heart, I do give people little exercises at the end of the chapter, but very brief ones, just so that people can look a little bit. I don't expect people to sit down with a pen and pencil and just write, pages and pages, but to give you an opportunity to take a look at the end of each chapter and see if you've kind of picked up on what the ideas are and how you can look at yourself and what changes you might want to make. I think a self-help book exists within a context of the person's life. I think the people who read my books are people who are on a search. So I don't worry that they're going to not follow all the principles in my book. I know that they're on a path and that they'll read another book in a couple of years and they'll go, oh yes, I remember hearing that somewhere before, and that may be the day that they're motivated to act. This is a part of the mosaic, a piece of the puzzle. And yet I think it can open doors and give people insights that perhaps they haven't had before.
And sometimes it's that teachable moment that the book may not sink in at the time, but you may arrive at a particular point in your life where you say, I know in a deeper way now what this means.
Exactly. I know for me there have been books that I have read at a particular moment in my life and have taken a step and acted very strongly on that step. And then there's been others where I've just kind of absorbed the information, as you say, and then later I've said, oh, that's what that person meant. That's what that's about.
In your book you speak of the higher power frequently in the robot and the spirit, and these seem to be, or at least remind me of the 12-step program. Have you consciously adopted some of that into your works?
The 12-step programs have such a strong spiritual base, and many of the people that I've worked with are involved in 12-step programs. There have been some really transforming experiences in my life, spiritual kinds of things, and in my work, I find that the spiritual principles are the things that people really are seeking. They may have emotional problems and they'll go to a psychologist for that. I am not a psychologist. My work really is about laying a spiritual foundation for your life. And the 12 steps are very much a part of that because they are such a great spiritual teaching. The references to a higher power, my personal belief is that the two most important relationships in one's life are one's relationship with oneself and one's relationship with one's higher power. Everything else is a reflection of those two relationships. So in Listen to the Heart, I urge people to look at their relationship with a higher power, be it God or be it a power within or whatever they choose to call it or whatever it is for them, and really develop that, because that's the foundation.
That also would seem to make things easier to handle when you can focus on two main pieces, two main relationships, instead of being very scattered and thinking about my relationship with A is not so good, and
Yeah.
and thinking about many areas where you have to do. I think that's a problem that a lot of us face. We try to deal with so many problems that we're frustrated in the end.
Yes, and I think that's very important what you're saying, Eileen, because now that I know that my relationship with you is a reflection of whatever's going on with me, I know where to look to solve the problem. And I'm no longer looking to you to solve the problem.
Good.
And exactly. It takes a lot of the burden out of the relationships, and yet I'm not feeling guilty about whatever is going on with me, and I'm not feeling like it's my fault if we're having a problem. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying, well, I'm a bad, wrong, terrible person because I'm having this problem. Let me give a specific example. Let's say that, and this is strictly hypothetical, that I discover in my relationship with you that you seem to be just a very judgmental person. Now, I've already talked about the fact that criticism isn't something that I particularly like, and I also don't like to see people criticize other people. So I notice when I'm around you, you're always judging this person and that person, what they're wearing and what they're talking and this and that. And I get more and more uptight. And I just keep thinking, honestly, that Eileen is so judgmental. She is so critical. I wish she would stop that. Why is she that way? Well, what am I doing? What am I doing? I'm judging you. I am criticizing you. What I don't like is not who you are in this relationship. What I don't like is who I become in this relationship, which is critical and judgmental, which is a characteristic that I've said a long time ago I'm not going to be and I don't like, but when I'm around you, I become it. Well, my inclination of my robotic part, that part I call the robot, is to blame you for that. If you wouldn't be that way, Eileen, then I wouldn't have these awful feelings. Well, that's all well and good, but the chances of my changing you are very slight. So what I have to do is say, wait a minute, Roberta, you're the one who's sitting here being judgmental about Eileen. That's what you need to talk with Eileen about. So then I sit down, and rather than saying, Eileen, it just drives me nuts, you're just judging everybody, I just can't stand it, what I have to do is I have to say, Eileen, I've noticed something about myself when I'm with you. When I'm around you, and you start talking about Susie and Jane and this one and that one and what's wrong with them, I get very critical of you. And I start doing the same thing to you that I see you doing to them. I don't like that characteristic in myself. It makes me very unhappy with myself. So when we're together, I am going to say to you, when the conversation starts turning to Susie or whatever, that I'm feeling uncomfortable with that. How about if we talk about something else? This way, I have dealt with my own problem, which is my own judgmentalness, but I've also communicated to you that that's a characteristic that I don't feel is particularly attractive about you, and that for us to have a good relationship, let's talk about some other things.
And that's wonderful, because even as you were saying that, my own internal thought was, oh, I must remember not to trigger that in her.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you see, whether you do trigger it or not, because maybe this is your habit. Maybe you hardly know how to say a word without making a judgment. But if I have your permission to at least tell you what's going on with me at that time, and even if I don't have your permission, if you want to be in a relationship with me, I'm going to have to be able to do that. Now you might say, well, Roberta, I don't want you telling me every time I'm talking about Susie. I like talking about Susie. Then that's your choice. And if you don't want to be then in a relationship with me, I'll go find someone else to be in a relationship with. There's 5 billion people in the world. Surely I can find someone else to be in a relationship with. But at least this way we have a choice. Now, the same thing might be true, let's say, of my disliking people who are conceited, that are always talking about themselves and think they're so wonderful. I don't do that. But the characteristic has still been aroused in me. Even though I'm not bragging and talking about how wonderful I am, what do I do with you when you're being conceited? In my mind, I put you down. I make myself better than you for not being conceited, for not doing what you do. That's a very conceited thing to do. So it's reflections. It's reflections. And what I have to do is to look over here first and then communicate what's going on with me to you.
It's sort of like saying the seed of all the problems that you see in other people exist within your own self.
It does. It absolutely does. But it doesn't mean that makes me bad or wrong or every relationship my fault. And I emphasize that because people take this thing that I say and turn it in on themselves and beat themselves up. For example, let's say that I'm in a relationship with someone who beats me. Could be a man or a woman, but just to be stereotypical, let's make it some poor guy, all right? And he beats me. Now, if I take to heart what Roberta is saying, then I might say, golly, that makes it my fault that this person is doing that. No. Just like it's not my fault if Eileen is a judgmental person. That's not my fault. What I need to do is to say, however, what is it about me that I keep getting hooked up with these guys who keep beating me up? I'm not going to change them. But I better take a look at what inside of me keeps attracting that or being attracted to that and put a stop to it over here so that that doesn't continue to happen. And maybe, again, I'm saying everything is a reflection. And maybe this is a reflection. A person who beats somebody up feels powerless. I mean, it may not look that way because they're beating someone up, but they feel powerless or they wouldn't be doing that. How do I feel relative to this person? Powerless. So the reflection is still there. So what I have to do is regain my power and say, I'm not going to be in a relationship like this, and take control of my life so that I don't have to keep repeating being with a powerless person who has to beat me up. I like to say it's all done with mirrors, and it really is.
Yes, yes, yes. I wonder sometimes if we have unreal expectations of our family members. They're human, as we've been talking about. They have their mixture of good and not so good qualities. Do you think we somehow expect people just because they're our family members to be better?
Yes, and to treat us just, wonderfully all the time. I think we have very unreal expectations.
Because we're just like them.
Yes, exactly, yes. And so I think, especially where parents are concerned, we have to let them off the hook. We have to recognize that our parents were probably very young in most cases, and maybe they were just emotionally coming out of some, had some very difficult things themselves. When I hear people talk about what they wanted from their parents, what I hear is they wanted to stay in the womb. They wanted to be fed, they wanted to be protected, they didn't want any danger. If something bad happened, their parents were supposed to take care of it. If they had a wound, it was supposed to be healed. Parents were supposed to be God. They're not. They're just people. So we did have hurts. We did have things that they didn't fix. We did have pain that they either caused or that somebody else caused and our parents didn't take it away. But they are just human beings. And if we can let them off the hook and forgive them, we can let ourselves off the hook. And so forgiveness is really a very selfish thing. But I think it's very important because it frees us from the past, from resentment and from bitterness. And that's essential for good relationships.
And now we're going to get off the hook of time, which is always a bad thing. It would be wonderful to talk longer. And for those of you who want to hear more, please read Listen to the Heart by Roberta Meyer. Thank you for being with us. It's been fun to visit today.
It's been wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
a presentation of the Hennepin County Library.